The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
Welcome to How to Money with Cole and Cole.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Cole.
We coach people every day on their money and how to plan for the future.
As financial advisors, we're here to have an honest conversation on investing, retirement, and everything in between.
At Full Swing Financial Planning, we're here to empower you to take control of your plan, your way, for your financial future.
So let's talk money.
And sports.
Welcome back to How to Money with Cole and Cole. Sitting here with the only Cole today, Cole Jaskey.
Cole with a C.
Cole with a C. If you don't watch YouTube, that'd be helpful because then they would always know which Cole I'm referring to because it's either Cole with a C or Cole with a K.
I know.
People are probably, the other day someone was like, you do a good job saying Cole with a P, Cole with a C.
Because you're used to it when someone calls the office and you're like, which Cole?
I always know when they are asking for you because I'll say, what's the last name? They'll be like, Jaskey.
the tough one. The tough one to
Jaskey.
say. Yeah.
Well, before we get into today's podcast, let's do a little sports. We had a college bet going on in the college championship game. No one won.
Yep.
Ohio State.
There was really no winner, no loser on that. We all sucked.
So if I don't win, nobody wins is what we're learning.
But you are looking good. You got the Chiefs. When this podcast comes out, I think this will have a Super Bowl winner.
Yes, it will.
But Bailey's gloating already because she's, I think, got the only one that's got a team left.
Which means I would win anyways.
Yeah, you're the default winner.
Yeah, not default.
You're just been gloating
winner.
that they're gonna the three-peat and all this.
Don't you guys think it's a little funny though? Like you played college football, Cole loves football, and I always win.
That's why
these football
That's
picks.
why there's sports betting, right? And that's why Vegas is alive because no one person can
I should bet more.
predict and do it. Yeah. So,
well, Vegas does all the time.
Yeah, that's.
Don't you ever think about how they
Vegas
always?
is not a person. It's
but do you think about that? Like, how do they always know?
It's so close. Yeah, it's wild.
Like, that something's not right.
How there's like a half a point, and you're like, how does that? Like, there's a field goal at the end. They're like, hey, that got it to a half a point. Like, that's fishy. You know? Peter's over there shaking his head. He's like, I know it's systems rigged.
Well, we don't have Cole Peterson here today, but we'll make it happen. This year you might hear both of them, might hear one of them. It just kind of depends on the schedule.
Yep.
We stay busy, but that's great. So let's get into it. So events that can derail your retirement plan. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I like this topic because this is what I love about our office. Hence the name Full Swing, right? We look at the full picture, the full swing. Like, I love sports analogies. Like, we could focus just maybe on how you're holding the club. I'm doing a baseball club or golf club because
you're going to here.
Or how you're standing or how you're bending, but that doesn't help. We want to look to make sure everything's working together because the reason is life is going to happen, and it's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when is it going to happen. And these are things we see commonly that kind of derail people's plans. The stronger the plan, the more it can endure during these times.
Yep, and it's one of those things that as we talk through the different scenarios and things that we think that can really derail a plan, some of it's firsthand knowledge. We've seen some people go through these things and adapt, but we do know the ones that are most successful are the ones that have thought through at least some of the contingencies. You obviously can't have a contingency for every single wrench that life throws at you, but there are a lot that are very common that we've seen that we do want to at least have a conversation on. So you're prepared, or we can give you the tools or the plan to really bounce back if one of these things do happen to you. And
more than likely, at least one is going to happen.
I agree.
So let's get into what are the things that can derail your retirement plan. Number one, unexpected life events. I would say this is the one we see the most. Would you agree?
Yep. And really, there's a multitude of areas, but we're going to start with health issues, right? Because that's generally the one I would say majority of people at some point is going to have a serious health issue or event,
or an unexpected,
during the retirement or even pre-retirement. Because that's the thing is we're talking about stuff that can derail maybe it sets you back 10 years because something happened early in life and you weren't able to save, or you had a really large unexpected expense, or you had a health issue and your income went away for a significant period of time. Or you're talking, very late in your retirement years where maybe you need, you have a long-term care event or some type of event that requires you to spend a much greater amount than you were anticipating on some type of healthcare needs.
I agree. I think obviously long-term care is number one because it's the most expensive, right? And at some point, unless you're extremely healthy, you're going to need some type of support care. We have things that we do for help with long-term care. We don't sell long-term care insurance, but we have strategies that can be like almost as a safety net for that when that comes.
It's definitely I'd say we go through an analysis on this. So one thing I love about, our software, the software we use, we can do, performers or projections on, hey, if you needed this type of care based on this area, we can put in an Iowa zip code or somewhere, and we can have a state average on what you'd expect to spend for, let's say, assisted living or, full-time nursing home, whatever it might be. And we can say, how does that impact your plan? Maybe, early retirement years, or maybe on the very back end. A lot of plans will build in a long-term care event at the very, the last 2 or 3 years or last year of a plan, to where we show you going in and needing X amount of, costs for care at that time, and how it impacts, what dollars you might or might not have at that point. And, why we think this is one of the, major life events that's, well worthwhile talking about is the likelihood, and it's almost up to at least 75% of people have some type of long-term care event in retirement. So I know everyone's parents joke and like, I'm never going to, a nursing home or put a pillow over
I hear my dad say
they
that
all say
all
this,
the
like,
time.
like all this. And I'm like, guys, that's not happening. Someone's not doing that.
I think you're forgetting how much I'd have to help you if you don't get help outside.
And it's like, but the likelihood of you needing some type of funding mechanism is statistically very probable that it's going to happen. So I think it's something that everyone should discuss. And the earlier you think about it, the more you can save or have a plan for it early on, because it is very expensive. It's probably one of the most expensive things that you can go through in retirement.
That's why I like having a safety net of a long-term care type of safety net, which is great. A health savings account, building emergency funds, things like preparing for an unexpected medical expense. Like I even think about from personal experience, like maybe you thought you were going to work till 65. So you have it planned out. This is how much I need to work. This is how much I need to save. But what if you you have a heart problem at 61, then you know what I mean? And then you can't work for a few years. All these things are like certain little medical things. It could change how long you can work. Maybe you have to retire sooner, or maybe you're in long-term care longer.
Or you can't spend as much.
Yes, thank you. And you almost have to accept the new reality of the plan, right? So what you thought your plan was going to look like, you may have to pivot to, especially with the long-term care. We see that a lot. People like, oh, my mom and dad had to deplete all their retirement savings, or they're really draining the accounts faster than we thought.
I do find it, people right now, the 60 to 70-year-olds, age people right now that are starting to take care of mom and dad.
Yes.
They're seeing the spend down of assets, and they're starting to like, oh my gosh, we need to think about this because we're seeing they're paying those bills out. We had someone in the office yesterday that was going through a policy to try to get money out for their mom's care. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt, but it's something. And unfortunately, people think about this a little too late sometimes. I think because it's you try to back end save for it versus, hey, let's save a little more early on for that specific cause.
I think it's one of those things in life, you don't worry about it until it's happening to you, and that's a lot with a lot.
Or you've gone through it.
Yes.
Gone through it some with a parent.
And you have experience of it. Don't wait till it's at your doorstep is what we're saying, because health issues are probably the number one event, whether it's you, your spouse, a grandparent, someone you're going to have to support.
So let's talk about job loss. Oof. That's another one. I think that
happens a lot. Like, for example, a company you've been at a company for 30 years, you have 10 more years left, and someone buys them out and they get rid of people, and you are not expecting to be one of those people.
Locally, Cargill laid off quite a few people locally here. We've seen, across the state, we're kind of in that business cycle right now where we're seeing that. I've had some clients, same thing, that, they're, and this is very hard, I think, when you're pretty close to retirement, but you're not quite there.
And you've committed to that job.
Because then you're restarting. You're kind of like, oh, God, I got to go through a training process and onboarding with a new company, even if you're
you're not as desirable to hire.
Yep. And you're not as motivated generally, just because you're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, hey, I'm potentially going to be leaving the workforce in 5 years. And this is something that, if you had a plan of like, hey, you were maxing your 401k, you were kind of banking on your company
using
match.
The health insurance is a big one, because now all of a sudden, if your spouse doesn't, there's so many ways this could derail the plan. I think it also, sometimes if people aren't prepared for a job loss, now all of a sudden they're taking money out of those accounts sooner. Now we're losing our power of growing that money and keeping it long term.
And then even the emotional side of
Yes.
it, right? Just the feeling of being let go. I don't care how long or who you are as a person. No one wants that feeling, so that can impact you.
I actually heard job loss is like a death for a lot of people. They experience job loss like a death. Like that's the grief you go through, especially if you've been there long term.
But I do want to circle back and think I do know people that have gone through job losses and we are very detailed plan. They're much more comfortable. I've gone through job loss for people reaching out to me for first time as they lose their job. They're much more like high strung.
Yes.
Like, having the plan gives you that sense of comfort of like, hey, I'm going to be okay, right? I'm going to, it maybe not like what I'm going to have to do the next couple of years, but I know as long as I can get through for a few more years, I know my plan, as long as I can do X, Y, Z, I'll still get to that retirement date.
And I feel like when you have a plan in place and there's safety nets for like, let's say a job loss and you have maybe another stream of income or you have an emergency fund that's built for this, then you don't make these emotional decisions and have to rush to get another job or you back yourself into a bad situation. When you have a solid plan in place, you can move from a solid place. So, okay, I lost my job, but maybe I'm going to use Cobra for a little bit and then I'm going to go find a job I really want to work for a couple of years. You can tell the people who have a plan because they move with a sense of power during these situations.
Yeah, they're not just jumping to the next opportunity.
Yes, they're not rushing into something they really don't feel like is a good thing for them. So job loss, health issues, what else?
So this is
probably the another top one.
Yeah, very, very top one I would say is divorce. Whether it's pre-retirement or in retirement, we see it both. I think it's definitely probably more common pre-retirement, and especially if you've been married for a very significant period of time, or if one spouse or the other was the primary income source or primary saver, or their income was the primary saving source, right? That can have a deep impact on both the husband and wife. So that's something, we're always advocates for, when you're getting married, to have the money conversation. We've talked about that in prior episodes of as those transition steps, how are you going to handle money? And that's something on the front end. If you can be a little more candid about that, whether it's prenups or different things, like that, it's important to do it early. But a lot of times people don't have any money when they start, they grow money, and then all of a sudden 25 years later, they split apart.
I definitely think it's situational with divorce. Like obviously we've said this before, first marriage, if you come from nothing, you make together money. Like me and Luke, I use this example, broke as a joke when we were married. Now, obviously,
broke as a joke.
Now we've accumulated. We're in, like, I'm just thinking in 20 years, Luke's not allowed to leave me, by the way. But in 20 years, I'm just using this as an example. We have clients like, okay, well, I'm getting ready to retire, but my wife wants to leave me, or her husband wants to leave me. Now I have to think, oh shoot, now we're dividing these assets and who's getting what and how is that going to impact my plan versus maybe second, third marriage when you've already accumulated some assets. I think people don't want to talk about it, but that's a good time for a prenup because you've already bringing assets in. And really what you're saying is either we're going to decide how this is divvied up if the worst case scenario happens, or we're going to put it up in someone else's hands. So do you want to be in control of your stuff, or do you want to give the government the power?
Probably one of the hardest ones that we have to deal with, because generally we work with couples, and when they're, they end up divorcing, generally we're probably going to lose one of those relationships.
Yes.
And you try to be impartial, but it's generally, I would say with most of our relationships, there's a primary point of contact for us. And that's where it's always a very tough spot as an
emotional.
Yes, very hard as an advisor standpoint there.
And it's not like anyone going through this part that's derailing their plan. They're dealing with a very emotional thing. So now we're trying to have them make rational decisions.
Sometimes the retirement plan's not the biggest priority at that moment.
Yeah. Yep. So health issues, job loss, divorce. I think obviously with a divorce, the number one thing you can do is work with someone, because things are getting intense. Things are dividing. Your income is not going to be the same. What you saved and you thought you were going to have is not going to, the whole plan's changing. Yep. Now we're playing for one person, possibly all sorts of things, but that's a tough one. Okay. So those are, some of those really big unexpected life events. Now we're going to get into the economic factors that may derail your plan. Number one, market volatility. Cole.
Yeah. So I always like to think of the COVID market time.
That's a good one.
Think if you were going to retire, somewhere in those dates, right? 2000, the beginning, middle of 2020. And we're the, Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500 are making 5% market volatility swings every other day. The government's saying this and this.
We're shutting down.
You can't do this. And all of a sudden your portfolio is down 28% or whatever it might be. Though that's one of the big things that as you're transitioning, kind of that ramp up to retirement, and I'm really talking pre-retirement right here. Well, I'll give two examples, pre-retirement, post-retirement. And this is why it's so important to have a plan in regards to your investment portfolio of how you're allocated.
Yes.
At least for the 5 years prior to retirement, especially if you have a very high reliance rate on your assets. And what I mean by that is, say I don't have a big pension or my Social Security benefits, pretty small.
Or your nest egg's not.
Yeah, most of my money is going to be coming from my 401k, or say I have $2 million in IRA assets. That's where my income's coming from. You have to be very, very conscious of how that portfolio is allocated, because if you start, say I need $8,000 a month and you're still pretty aggressive and your portfolio is down 20% and you're taking 8% out, it's going to have a yes, it can have a really big impact on the longevity of your portfolio and how long it can really last. So that's why it is important. A lot of times we are making active allocation changes basically from 5 years up to that retirement date, especially if you're going to be taking, a really large percentage of your income is going to come from your portfolio. And then the same impact, in retirement, generally we're not as aggressive. You shouldn't be. Now, some people
have a large they can handle it, and they have enough money where the swings aren't going to make
very
or break their
situational.
plan. Yeah.
But for the masses, most people should be a little more conservative, and it doesn't mean get, to be all CDs at the bank or anything like that. But generally our goal is to try to level out your portfolio to where the swings aren't as big. So we're not going up and down as much, but we're staying kind of steady as we're unwinding or taking distributions from the portfolio. But that's one really big thing, is if you're misallocated either pre-retirement or post-retirement, and you go through. We've been very fortunate. The market's been really, really solid here, and basically since
we've been riding a good wave in our job.
Other than COVID in my career,
yes,
close to 10 years, the market's been really, really, really solid.
And that's what I was just gonna say. We don't have the experience. I'm saying 2008. I know personally, my dad or even that generation, they're more emotional about the market volatility, where we're ride it out. But as you get closer to retirement, you want to be more prepared for something like that.
And one strategy, I've talked about this, I know on the podcast before, but we always look, so think of, hey, how can we prepare for market volatility or a downward market for a significant period of time? Doesn't mean you have to be completely conservative, but you do need to have buckets of money that maybe are less subject to the market. So I always talk about having 12 to 18 months of income that are parked aside. So if the market does go down, or say we get a period of COVID where we're very volatile, we know, hey, we've got this bucket over here. Worst case scenario, we can draw from that's not subject to that volatility, and we can wait out the other side of the portfolio till it hopefully rallies back.
And that's why I also love our retirement software, because we can also say, okay, if the market did what it did in 2008, would you be comfortable losing this amount in your nest egg? And that's a good visual. People are like, ooh, could I ride that wave out? So there's just a lot of emotions, and no one can determine the market, and no one can determine if another COVID event, something's going to happen that will derail the market at some point.
I think it's always good to put it into dollar amount, versus percentage, because, a normal pullback once a year, it's very common for us to have a 10% pullback. But if you have $1 million, 10% is $100,000. So if you put that in front of someone and say, hey, based on how your portfolio is allocated, in any given year, a 10% pullback is very likely. How would you feel if all of a sudden your portfolio went to $1 million to 900,000? Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Can you pause? Hey, I'm not okay with that. All right, what should maybe we do to make an adjustment to that?
And if you don't know if you can handle that, that's why you work with someone, because they can be like, this is how long it'll take to come back. This is what we can do to make that money back in that time. You know what I mean? You can pull the levers you need to pull. But also I think this is very common for people who have all their nest egg in their 401k and they don't ever really look at it. And all of a sudden they're 63 and they haven't diversified it. And they're like, oh, I wanted to retire next year, but I lost this amount because they hadn't had someone else look at their 401k, right? Like they've been aggressive since they were there at 30. Now they're 62 and it's still full gas to the pedal.
Because that's a great
a lot
point.
Of people do
great
that.
point, because if you look at today is what, January 28th. So January 27th was Monday. We woke up and the NASDAQ futures were down like 5%.
Yes.
And it was on news overnight of China, some tech stuff. But anyways, what I'm getting is you don't know when those really big drawbacks are coming. Sometimes there's kind of, hints of like, hey, we're going in a bad direction economy wise. But right now we're really, things look pretty good. But you don't know when all of a sudden that 25% pullback comes, and it might last 12 months, 18 months. And then that's right around your retirement date.
Yes.
And you have not made any adjustments. It might cause you to not retire for 2 more years.
And that's why you want to plan.
Yes.
That's why you want to look at the full picture, and I'm not knocking anyone. I think this is very common. You do what you do in your 401k and you just wait, and then they go to retire like, hey, I have all this money in 401k. They don't even know how it's allocated. Please
don't come to us like,
64.
A month before your retirement date. That's what I always ask. We get that a lot. Like, and they're like, I wish.
Or I'm retiring in a month. Can I meet with you? I'm like, yes, but.
I had someone recently.
Yes, they do that a lot.
Happened. I'm like, God, I wish I would have met you 4 years ago.
And that's why I always say, no pun intended with full swing. No, I'm just kidding. But come in when you're younger. And it's not like we see you all the time, but we're preparing. Like me and Chloe are easy age right now. We're full in aggressive. Like we have time is on our side, and that's not the case with someone nearing retirement.
Yep.
So another one, this also COVID, a good example, inflation.
Yeah. And really the impacts of the stimulus that, happened during COVID. But, if you think, I think it was 2 years, maybe 2 years ago, where the cost of living increase in Social Security, which is based on kind of an inflationary environment, it was one of the largest of all time. It was around 10% increase. Mm-hmm. So that means we had a year where, inflation was running at like 10% or higher. So that means your dollar, the year prior, your dollar was going 10% less. So it was costing you more and more to live. So that's one of the kind of silent killers of a retirement plan later in life, especially if you live if you have longevity. You just go and talk to anyone that's, in their 70s or 60s, 70s, like, well, what was, gas, bread, milk, when you were 25 years old, when you were raising kids, when you had your first kid, and they're like, oh, it was, 75 cents for a gallon of milk, whatever it is. And now it's $6 or what, I don't even know what I tells you I don't do the grocery shopping, but I know it's expensive.
I'll tell you, I know
it's expensive, but that's one thing that a lot of people don't think about much, but we do. And that's the same thing. We're referring back to our planning software we use, and it's really a great tool for us, but we can mess with the inflation numbers, or we can throw in a scenario and say, what if inflation's double what we think it is for the next decade?
What do you really need saved up to live the life you want?
Yep.
So I just think inflation's going to always be a thing. You can prepare for it, but you can't prepare for when it's going to have the 10%. That was a rough time.
Which, a lot of impacts when it
Yes, yeah. And then lastly, on the economic factors, interest rate changes. Also, we've seen this.
Yep. And I think right now, this is one for people that are, if you bought a new house or you're pre-retirement. Yes. I don't think interest rate, generally, we try not to have people carry debt into retirement. Just a normal person that doesn't have business assets or outside income streams, we would prefer you not to have that liability.
Yes.
That liability. But in some cases it makes sense, or they have the assets, or they have a very low interest rate. Mm-hmm. They have very high pension amounts that can pay it. But, if you're someone, that went from a 2%, 2.5%, 15-year mortgage to a 7%, that can change your cash flow significantly. Yes. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I wanted to upgrade houses, because I want a nicer house, but now I can't save as much in my 401k, mm-hmm. right? And we're seeing that happen right now, where unfortunately people are making those decisions of like, oh, I want a new car, but I'm, going to pay 9% interest rate for the car. So now, I gotta fund that, and I can't fund my Roth IRA anymore. And nothing,
I'll just say this:
Bailey's blood.
Do the Roth over the new car.
Yeah, you can't funnel the Roth IRA. So,
but I think just keeping a balance, of short-term, long-term investments to manage these rate changes. That's what we really help with.
This podcast is produced by Spin Market and Digital. Located in Fort Dodge, Iowa, Spin Market's highly skilled team can help you increase your market by updating your website, improving SEO, designing advertisements, and producing podcasts that will grab the attention of your market. Contact Spin Market today for all your digital marketing needs at digitalagent@spinmarket.com or call us at 515-302-8026. And to learn more, visit our website at www.spinmarket.com. That's digital agent at spinmarketwith2ks.com or 515-302-8026. Or visit our website at www.spinmarketwith2ks.com.
Let's do a little dollars and cents. Dollar bills, y'all. Nicole wasn't here.
All right. So, beings, it's, this episode's going to come out, I think the week after the Super Bowl, or a couple days days after the Super Bowl. We're doing the top 3 most expensive halftime performers of all time. Coming in at number 3 back in 2007, Prince. It was $12 million, which Peter looked up for us pre-episode here when we were getting ready. That's worth $18 million today, which, according to the list here, was probably the most expensive of all time. Yeah, Prince.
Prince should have had a will.
Minnesota. Yeah, he kind of had a crazy situation, right? Still going on.
Yeah,
I think there's still some issues going on there.
Derailed their plan.
Number 2, one of my favorites of all time, Shakira and J-Lo.
Why is that your favorite?
They're just, two amazing performers.
Talented.
Yep.
J-Lo is fit. They are some fit.
Yeah, I feel like they both
like 50.
Are like,
yeah.
J-Lo scares people, I feel like.
Yeah,
she's like,
she scares
she
me.
Beat you up.
She scared Ben Affleck.
Yeah, apparently, I know. $13 million in 2020.
That's crazy.
$13 million.
And think how long they perform.
What, 4 or 5 minutes, 6 minutes maybe? Mm-hmm. And then number 1 of all time, I was kind of shocked by this, but 2021, The Weeknd.
I think it's because he had. Do you remember that show though? Like he had a bunch of crazy stages. They were like walking. Peter's like, yeah, they were walking through like dark lights. Like I think it was probably the stage and the production, the amount of dancers. But yeah, I didn't even really like that one, to be honest.
And who'd we say? Who'd we say was this year? I looked it up.
Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar.
They not like us.
Yeah, he's got a lot of hit songs. He's kind of would be popular in the NFL scene too. A lot of he kind of runs around a lot of those people.
It is just crazy what the Super Bowl does for the. You think about the cost of the game, the cost of the halftime show, the cost of the. Think about all the money poured into the Super Bowl.
New Orleans and Atlanta seem to have a lot of major events. Atlanta just gets everything. I feel like they have like the SEC, all the SEC championships.
Do you have to bid to get it?
I don't know how that all works. I think like a lot of the college football championships are kind of in the same location. Yeah. Like the Big 12 is in Dallas, always at the Cowboys Stadium. Like
that's definitely a bucket list though, just to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
for sure. I'm surprised Taylor Swift isn't the halftime show. Just kidding.
Has she been the halftime? I'm sure she hasn't. I don't think she has.
So.
No.
What was your favorite halftime show? Do you remember?
Oh, it was the one with like Eminem, 50 Cent. It was
that was good.
The Los Angeles halftime, which is 2022. It was when the Rams won the Super Bowl.
I did like Justin Timberlake the one year. Janet Jackson.
That was
when we were in high school.
2004. No, it's 2004.
Was it?
I looked it up. Yeah, it's 2004.
2004. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways.
All right, we better get back on task here.
Yeah, we're going off the rails. Get it? I'm just out full of them.
She's full of puns today.
All right. So let's get into it. What other things can derail your plan? And I think this is probably one we coach through the most on a day-to-day basis is personal choices. Would you agree? Like the more conversations you're having every meeting versus like the harder conversations when the other ones we discuss come up.
Yeah, the other ones are maybe more triggering events. Yes. I would say this is more habits, right? Yeah. Or different things of like, hey, we need to.
This is what we're really
make sure we're working on this or thinking about this, right? And really one of the biggest ones, especially that I would say before I'm giving the blessing and I always tell people you're in control. If you want to retire,
it's your choice.
Yeah, if you want to retire, I'm going to tell you what we think because you're coming to work with us. And if you want,
and a good coach is going to tell you the truth.
And sometimes our job is to say, hey, this is probably not the right thing based on what you've told me.
You really should work one more year, or you should, you know what I mean, not plan on taking that trip in retirement.
And which, it's easy to do when you don't have work tethered to you every day. You get a little bored. Boredom can sometimes cause you to spend more money, and overspending is what we're really talking about. And this is one that we really think is important to, if you're, a year out from retirement, is really go through a detailed post-retirement budget and recheck your income to make sure the spending numbers that we've been planning around into retirement are going to be very, very accurate or within, a close deviation of that.
I think the overspending in retirement, the number one thing though, that does cause overspending is the lack of a plan, right? So if you don't have that plan in place, you're kind of willy-nilly in it, and you're like, oh, maybe I can buy this car, or maybe I can take this trip, or maybe I can retire at 63. You know what I mean? But you don't plan for healthcare cost raising, inflation raising, the emotional spending. Like, I think emotional spending's in retirement, because you're like at that point where like, I deserve this. I've worked hard for this. I can do whatever I want with my money. I feel like that's a very common mindset. Like, I want to spend.
I get to do this now.
Yeah, I want to spend this before, or maybe it's, I don't need to leave money to anyone because I earned all the money. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy and spend your money. The better the plan, the better the budget, the more you can spend, because that's how you can continue to also grow the money throughout retirement.
And sometimes it's the difference of working 1 or 2 more years,
yeah.
And that can be the case. Maybe it's paying off debt before you do something, but it's, I think people need to be realistic with themselves. Sometimes they do. They say, oh, I've been spending $10,000 a month for the last 20 years, roughly, but I'm going to go down to $6,000 in retirement. Very rarely does someone go down in lifestyle, downscale in lifestyle.
Upscale.
Very, very, very rarely. And I always hesitate for people when they tell me that, of like, oh, we're just not going to spend as much. I know we won't. And I'm like, you've been spending the same way. We're creatures of habit.
You're just going to change your lifestyle.
It's very generally concerning for me, especially if someone doesn't have a very high floor income. And by floor income, I mean like pension, Social Security, something that's like very steady every month that is coming in, no matter what the market's doing, interest rates are doing, you're still getting that money. It definitely concerns me. And sometimes people do think that they're just going to go down in spending. And most of the time, in my experience, it does not happen.
No, unless you've paid off a big, the mortgage.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, I don't have that too.
Like a cash flow item.
But I still think that's when the lifestyle creep also comes in. Like,
we can take a nicer vacation, or we can take one extra vacation.
I actually looked this up. According to a 2024 survey, the Employee Benefits Research Institute said 31% of retirees are spending more than they can afford. And that just comes back to, again, the full plan. Like,
I have people that on a constant basis, I'm concerned. And I express, that's one thing that I'm very direct. I'll be like, I don't feel comfortable. I'm just telling you. And you can keep going down this rate.
But Cole Jasky, it should be Cole Jasky equals direct.
Yeah.
Is his personality.
Because that's the thing, is like, I don't want that conversation down the road. Someone saying, well, you told me I can do this. No, I told you we probably should back
that. This is what will happen if you continue down this way.
And that's where, as long as people, obviously, as long as they know, hey, this is a risk. I think I'm doing my job. We want to inform you and try to educate the best you can. It's still your choice to make.
And I still think too, I hear this, I budget my whole life. I don't need a budget now. Why? Keep that habit, keep that spending, saving, all those habits in retirement the way you have before, because that's what got you to this point. Don't just get to retirement.
Stay disciplined with it.
Yes, because discipline does breed happiness. I truly believe that. Like, if you're just looking at it, number one, and just being prepared for these unexpected things that can derail you, or just being aware of your emotions in retirement, that can also help with overspending. Another personal choice that we see a lot is early withdrawals.
Yeah, and I would, an example of this would be like, hey, I want to pay off this debt. I'm 58. I'm not at my 59 and a half age, and I want to pull X amount from my IRA just to pay off debt. And sometimes that might be the right case, but most of the time,
you're stealing from your future.
Yep. You're just swapping the liability to something else. You're knocking off a cash flow liability, but you're adding to your tax liability. You're reducing your retirement assets. So that's something, or you just want to overspend for a lifestyle.
I was just going to say, I feel like a lot of people get to 59 and a half and they're like, okay, I'm ready to roll out my 401k, but I want to take 20,000 out or 30,000 out to do this and this, or I want to pay off. It's like, no, can we cash flow that? Or can we, you know what I mean? Let's get to retirement, keep that, because the power of the money being invested is how it's going to grow. And
I would say, just easy habit is, and I try to coach everyone this way, of like, your retirement accounts are retirement accounts for
a reason.
Yes, for a reason. Let's leave them as long as we can. Let's not try to do a lifestyle purchase or event unless we have it in our, taxable accounts or savings account, or we've planned for it. Try not to make that, rash of like, ooh, I hit this age point, or I want to do this. I want to take my family here. Or I want to overspend. They get
set on these like milestones. Like, I'm going to do this here, do this here. And I'm not saying that's not doable, but let's plan for it way in advance. All right. So we went through health issues. We went through economic factors. Those are the personal choices we want you to focus on that can derail your plan. If you know me, I love a budget at any stage in life.
No.
Every stage of life. But other things we really need to consider that can derail your plan is unexpected expenses.
Yeah, I would say, again, going from personal experience or things I've seen is maybe, you're close to retirement and you maybe have an adult child that needs help or has, some type of, personal issue, whether maybe they go through a divorce and they need help, or financially they lose a job and you're helping them so they don't lose their house or they can't pay their bills. And sometimes that can be something that is, can really be a detriment because you're maybe pulling some of that money from a retirement account
to support them.
And that's what, as a parent, I understand that, but there's also, there's times where it's probably like, is this necessary? It better be
the right thing.
Yep. Is it the right thing to do for
Very
not only
situational.
you and your kid or whoever the individual is helping? And I people are very generous in nature, most people anyway. So it's very easy to get taken advantage of, I think, when in some of these examples.
But you don't want to be generous to the point where it's going to derail your life in a very negative way. You know what I mean? If I understand, like, I think if I got in a serious accident and I couldn't work and my dad someone needed to support me for a year. So I get that. But I also wouldn't want him to do that at the expense where it's derailed his entire, I don't know. It's tough.
You don't want to put that burden on anyone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And family emergencies is another one. So that's like, say you're not close to retirement. You're maybe a long ways from retirement, but you're doing your planning and you want to plan save X amount, but all of a sudden, you get you have a serious car accident and you're out of work for a couple years, multiple years, and you don't have disability insurance or don't have things. And those are some
the
of those
safety nets we really want to put into plan.
Those are the things. I know most people talk about life insurance, for, hey, if something happens, if I die, but what happens if you can't work? Those are things a lot of times people don't think about. And we can't cover every contingency and every problem that's going to cover.
We would love to, because we love control.
Yeah, there's unlimited funds, right? We'd have everyone to have a, protection on that stuff. But those are definitely things that you want to keep an eye on, or at least, let's think through, if that does happen, how can we adjust?
And maybe not so much in Iowa. I think another one that's really big is natural disasters. Yeah. Like, you think about all the hurricanes, you think about, there's been a lot of Florida. A lot of those people
are out, not working, right? Or they're maybe, especially if you're in, say you live in California or something and you're in more of a blue collar type field where you're an hourly worker and can be a great job, but most of the time if you're not working, you're not getting paid.
And that's the thing, when something happens, let's say the fire with the houses, now you can't work, now you're taking time off, now you're getting into you hear people all the time like, I didn't want to pull from my retirement funds, but I had no other choice. And I'm not saying there's a way you can get through these without having to do against the plan, but more of the safety net of an emergency fund, or are we living in the right area where it's affordable for us to save enough? Do I need to get a second job? And there's just so many things that come to play with that.
The emergency fund's probably one of the vital check marks in a beginning stages of retirement plan.
Yes.
Right. So, or any type of whether it's a retirement plan or just a financial plan, is having that emergency savings bucket can soften, the time period that you have to rush into another decision, or if an emergency happens, money is not the thing that you have to think about for that in that short period of time.
Correct. And when you have the emergency fund, then you're not depleting the funds we want to grow for retirement. So it's not necessarily derailing the plan. It's just derailing our life for a little bit.
All right, let's talk about changes in tax law.
Ooh, fun. This is something I could talk about all day. I'm just kidding.
I'm sure.
Kidding. Nobody.
Well, we have seen this, we're in Iowa, so we've seen some positive changes in our tax law for retirees specifically. Retirees, farmers, retired farmers, there's some benefits of where your Social Security, your retirement pensions, like IPERS in the state of Iowa, or if you can elect, if you're a landowner and you want to elect into it, you can no longer have some of that income subject to state income tax, which this year for Iowa, it's 3.8%. So right there, it's almost 4% you're saving of net savings that you don't have to pay if you're based in the state of Iowa. Now there's some states that have no income tax. So, Florida, Texas, we have clients, Arizona. But also it can work on the other way. Say you live in a higher income tax state, that taxes are going up and you're taking retirement distributions. That's kind of that same inflationary effect. And now all of a sudden maybe your tax rate went up, 1 or 2% at the state level, and then the federal income tax.
But it adds up. It's adding up.
It's the silent killer of, of your retirement plan. And there's definitely other considerations, on the tax side. But again, there's so many variables and situations.
Depends where you're at, situational.
And this one's definitely more individualized that you want to have a plan on.
But it is something you can think about in your plan. Where do I want to retire, and it depends on your nest egg, but if you can't afford it, maybe I do need to move to a state where there's more tax advantage things for retirees. Like, I don't need to pay state income tax.
And warmer weather, right?
Yeah.
Nothing against Iowa, but we like our warmer weather.
I always tell people, like, all these things we just went through, personal choices, overspending, health issues, divorce. It's not if life is going to hit you, it's when life is going to hit you. And I think that's within anything in life. But when you're financially stable, or you just have a solid plan, you're going to be able to pivot through these things easier. I'm not saying they're not going to be stressful, but when you're working with someone who can help you pull the right levers or have you prepared for these things, the quicker you're going to get through them, and the emotional, more sound you're going to be during these things, because all these things are emotional. And that's why money is so emotional. And retirement is the one thing we're all working hard to get to, right? And now we all have these things that are derailing the plan. And you can get through any of these.
I think it's, I'd love to use we're going to use our sports analogies, but think about the teams, and I use the Chiefs, as an example. They're so well coached, and they're prepared for all these different scenarios. You can see when they play. Yeah. And anyone that's got like kind of high level football exposure, they've practiced so many things, and that's why they have so many successful outcomes. I think that's so relatable to a retirement plan.
You can pull the play out.
Yes.
You need to pull that. That's ready for that off time, one situation that you need right here.
Or
to win the Super Bowl.
ran through that scenario. Like, if this does happen, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Or here's how we can fix it.
That's a great analogy. And that's, again, I couldn't imagine doing these things alone. I from experience, even my dad's gone through some of these things recently. He's close to retirement. I know he's fortunate for full swing. And any advisor, it doesn't have to be us. This is why it's nice to have a plan and have someone walk you through the plan.
Well said, Baileigh.
Well, and I like the Chiefs analogy, because you're just basically saying my Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. And they're not my Chiefs. That's not my team. It's my team against Cole and Cole in the bet.
My Chiefs.
Peter, we got to look back and see what the bet was.
I'm picking the Eagles.
You want to double bet it right now? Lunch?
Okay, you're on.
A coffee.
Okay.
Let's not get outside
we'll get a coffee.
Okay.
We're outside Bailey's budget of lunch. We can go to a $4 coffee. We can't go to a $12 lunch. So
I'm sorry. Have you?
Well, I don't know if you can get $12 lunch. Actually, yeah. Speaking of inflation, there you go.
Yeah, the prime example. But also, we do have a really cool community event coming up. We're not going to say it today, but we'll say it the next podcast.
We got a few details to get ironed out yet.
But I always want to remind you, if you want to listen to me and the Cole and Coles, but mostly me, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. It's just a nice thank you. It's just like a review when we get it. We love those. If you don't have good feedback, shoot me an email. I'll take the negative feedback.
We love the feedback, and we want to continue to grow our reach.
Yeah, and please share, and be on the lookout for our awesome event coming up, and if you're in the Fort Dodge area. Okay, it's one thing to be a part of an organization. It's another thing to be a part of the community. Travis Kelce.
Boom.
Go Chiefs.
You've been listening to How to Money with Cole & Cole, the podcast of Full Swing Financial Planning. To learn more, visit their website at www.fullswingfinancial.com and follow them on Facebook and LinkedIn.
For now, I'm Cole.
I'm Baileigh.
And I'm Cole.
And we'll see you on the greens.
Security and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC.